Ooh, well guys, looks like the gorilla won. So last Saturday, the UFC held a fight night event in Des Moines, Iowa, and I actually wasn't watching the majority of the card. Instead, I was playing the new Oblivion remastered game. But I did watch the two fights that mattered to me the most, which was the main event and the co-main event. First off, let me get this out of the way and say, great performance by Corey Sandhagen. I feel bad for Figgy though for his injury in the end of the fight. But my main event was the co-main, which was RDR versus Bo Nickal. This was one of the best hate watch fights ever. Bo Nickal takes on his first loss in the UFC, and ooh, that was so satisfying to watch. The universe is now in peace and tranquility. But let's talk about his loss. Is the hate that Bo's getting really deserved? And was he fraud checked? Well, let's go back in time to where it all started. The year 2023, where Bo debuted into the UFC. Before he had his debut fight, Bo Nickal was a three-time NCAA Division I National Wrestling Champion. Pretty solid, you know, pretty good record. From there, he made the change from wrestling to MMA. He fought at the Dana White Contender Series twice the year prior to his debut, wins both times by submission and in the first round, and is then granted a contract to the UFC. Okay, that doesn't look too bad, you know? I can see why this guy had some hype behind him. He goes into the UFC and gets two fights and wins both of them in the first round. Questionably though, they put him on the main card over Robbie Lawler in UFC 290. But then, the UFC decided to do a big no-no. UFC 300 comes around, and for those of you who don't know, this is basically the UFC's version of our own Super Bowl or WrestleMania. That only happens once every 7 to 8 years. So they gotta go out and have a big bang with these fights, you know? And who did they decide to have as the opening fight for the pay-per-view card? They put Bo in it. Hey, by the way, the fights that happened before the pay-per-view started had Yuri, Garbrandt, Figgy, and Sterling. All of them were former champions. And what did Bo Nickal bring to the table? 2 wins. That's it, just 2 wins. And they put him as the pay-per-view opening fight. You might as well just bring back CM Punk into the UFC and put him on the main card too, because even though he had already got beaten up twice in the UFC before, hey, who cares, right? Who cares? He wins that fight too. Fast forward, and he fights in another pay-per-view card against Paul Craig. And this time, he wasn't the opening fight. Oh, no. He was the featured fight before the co-main, and he ends up giving one of the most boring performances ever. Everybody in the arena was booing at Bo Nickal at the end of the fight. And what was even more cringe was that he pulled this in the middle of the fight.
But if you're safe, right, you still take him down.
Yeah, but the thing is, the real problem is...
Bro thought he was him. He really thought he entered the Matrix. Since that fight, we were all at this point fed up at the UFC trying to push Bo like if he was the next DC at the middleweight division just cause he has some good wrestling background. Nobody liked that fight, not the fans or even the commentators themselves said they liked that fight. Not one single soul enjoyed watching that fight, except for this guy.
I'm super happy with my performance. I feel like that was definitely just a real valuable experience for me. And
come on, bro. Out of all the languages that you could have spoken, you decided to speak lies. And to make matters worse, this guy genuinely believes that he can beat Khamzat Chimaev, a guy who recently won a fight against Robert Whittaker by breaking his jaw while trying to choke him. And now recently, Bo swears that he can take on the gorilla.
Could 100 men take down one gorilla?
Give me like 3 of me, and I think we'll take him out. Easy.
I've had enough of this behavior. Someone do something. Somebody. Anyone. Enter RDR.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
On March 12th, the UFC announced Bo Nickal's next fight. But it won't be a pay-per-view card, surprisingly, and it'll be against a real challenger, Rainier the Ritter. Who is RDR? He used to compete in one championship and was also a 2-division world champion in both at the middleweight and light heavyweight division. Goes into the UFC and has 2 wins ending in a finish prior to this fight. Who's gonna win this fight? The guy who was a double champ in another organization, or the guy who was barely starting out his MMA career? I don't know what's gonna happen, but it's the UFC. Anything can happen. Everybody and their mamas prayed to the MMA gods to answer our prayers, and they did exactly that.
How about this from Rainier to Ritter?
Bo not only loses, but gets TKO'd for the very first time in his career. Marvelous heavens. That was a beautiful thing to witness. I had a very good sleep that night after watching that. Peak happiness right there. Almost immediately when the fight was over, the MMA community celebrated like if John Jones versus Tom Aspinall was finally announced. Everyone is just egging on him since that lost, and no one is holding back on what they have to say about this fight. But the question still remains, is the hate deserved, and was he fraud checked? Yes. Definitely, yes, it was definitely deserved, and yes, he did get fraud checked. I don't usually dislike a fighter for the way they fight, but it's the way they carry themselves. You had Dana and the UFC trying to promote this guy as hard as they could in the promotion, and it's one thing to be hated on by everybody who is just trying to do their job on winning a fight, but it's also another thing to go around and say to everyone that you're the best of the best and downplay your own performance, that you did so good on your last fight that you gotta say that even the commentators, which one of them was DC, who was a 2-division champion, that they're all wrong. Yeah, that's cool and all that you have a good wrestling background, but you gotta be good at everything else in MMA. He bought into his own hype that the UFC fabricated for him, and now he's living in Delulu land and believes he can take on anyone. But in the end, he was ultimately defeated by the gorilla. So, what's next for Bo? Honestly, I don't even know, man. I really do not know. He fought RDR, who is number 13 on the middleweight division. This is the highest ranked opponent he's fought so far, and look what happened. I mean, he can try to possibly fight against Abus for the number 15 spot, but even then, I don't even know if he has a chance for that too. Even as I'm writing the script for this video, I'm just thinking, what can this guy even do? Like seriously, I think almost in a way he's stuck. Okay, realistically, he just needs to improve on his striking and his defense, which is the reason why he got TKO'd by RDR. Possibly send him to Thailand and make him learn Muay Thai for 2 years and forget. And then maybe, just maybe, this guy can come back to fight someone ranked again and see if he succeeds. Or just start a podcast after losing to some opponents. But anyways, that's all I really have to say about Bo. UFC 315 is coming up this Saturday. I hope my boy JDM gets the title. I'll probably make a video on that fight too. But until then, I'll see y'all later. Goodbye.